take you to the Information Ministry, where Lands and Natural Resources Minister Abu Jinapo is about to address the media on Ghana's first lithium contract. He will be telling us about the terms, the benefits, and the way forward. All directors from the Ministries of Lands and Natural Resources and Ministry of Information. We also have with us the Technical Director for Mines, Mr. Peter Ewua. Also with us is the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Mr. Martin Kweku Aisi. Also with us this morning is the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Income Investment Fund, MIF, Mr. Edward Nanaya Okranting. Also with us is the Advisor of Mines to the Minister, Mr. Benjamin Aye. We also have with us the Chief Director of the Ministry of Information, Madame Charlotte Morgan Asiedu. We are also joined by the Deputy Minister for Lands and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament of Takwan Swayem constituency, Honorable George Mrekuduka. And as I mentioned earlier, we have with us the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament for Damongo constituency, Honorable Samuel Abu Jinapo. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I will yield to the Honorable Minister for his address, and then we will come back to you for the next part.
Thank you very much, Madam. The Honorable Deputy Minister for Information, Madam Fatih Abubakari, my Deputy Minister responsible for Mines, Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Income Investment Fund, our friends from the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources is grateful to the Ministry of Information, as always, under the able leadership of its Minister, Honorable Kojo Ponkroma, for putting this platform together this morning to enable us engage the Ghanaian public on the first mining lease signed for the exploitation of lithium in our country. We are grateful. We also thank you, the media, for always responding to our invitation and for helping us reach the Ghanaian people wherever they may be on such matters of national importance. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you will recall that at a brief ceremony at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources on Thursday, 19th October 2023, I signed on behalf of the President of the Republic the first mining lease for the exploitation of lithium in our country. This followed Cabinet's approval of a policy for the exploitation and management of green minerals in our country, and extensive negotiations spanning several months between government and Barari DV Limited, a subsidiary of Atlantic Lithium Limited, which President Akufo-Addo had to, on some occasions, personally intervene. Since this act, there has been some commentary on the mining lease under reference, with several people and institutions sharing their opinion on the transaction. Government welcomes the extraordinary public interest and scrutiny of this mining lease, as it is the surest way of ensuring that the mineral resources of our country are utilized for the benefit of the Ghanaian people, as dictated by our national constitution. We, however, note that much of the commentary ignore the actual terms of the lease, which I am told is available on the website of the Minerals Commission. On 27th October 2023, I issued a 26-point press release detailing the processes leading to the grant of the mining lease and giving highlights of the lease, which obviously differs from all previous mining leases granted for the exploitation of any mineral in our country. This is easily verifiable from a cursory examination of the mining lease and the reference. Regrettably, some public commentary on the matter continues to ignore all these details. In recognition of our constitutional duty to manage the natural resources of the country for the benefit of the Ghanaian and integrity, we have called this press conference to provide once again detailed information to the Ghanaian people on the processes leading to the signing of the mining lease, as well as details of the lease that makes it different from all previous mining leases. And if I should emphasize, and most importantly, how this mining lease benefits our nation. This will be done by the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission. But distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before I invite the Chief Executive Officer to address us, kindly indulge me to clarify a few issues. Firstly, Barari DV Limited, the company granted a mining lease for the exploitation of lithium in Ewoya, has been undertaking exploration for almost a decade in the central region of Ghana. From when they were first granted a recognizance license in August 2012, which was subsequently converted to a prospecting license in March 2018 for 3 years, and renewed for 3 additional years in July 2021, Barari DV Limited has been engaged in recognizance, exploration, and prospecting for all these years. As I say, let me emphasize, from August 2012. When they reported commercial find of lithium, government took a decision not to treat this mineral in the same manner in which others had been treated in the past. We therefore decided to make a policy for the exploitation and management of lithium and other green minerals of our country before any form of negotiations will commence. To make the development of the policy more participatory, on 13 July 2022, I presented to Parliament, on behalf of government, a statement setting out the general framework of the proposed policy for the development, management, and exploitation of the green minerals in our country. Following input from honorable members of Parliament and other stakeholders, a policy was developed by the ministry and submitted to Cabinet, which, after intense scrutiny, critique, and inputs, approved a reviewed policy on 27th July 2023. The approved policy includes provisions for an increase in the royalties rate for green minerals, an increase in state and Ghanaian participation in all green mineral operations to a minimum of 30%, just like Geodec and Gisdec, just like bauxite and iron ore, to a minimum of 30%. An enhanced local content and local participation, including listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and value addition and beneficiation for all green minerals in our country. It was based on this policy that we entered into negotiations with the company, leading to the signing of the mining lease. Ladies and gentlemen, respectfully, let me forcefully state that this lease differs from all previous mining leases in many respects, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission will shortly, as I say, give you details to support this claim. Suffice for me to point out that it is the first time in the history of our country that we have successfully negotiated for 10% royalties for any mineral, which is one of the highest for exploitation of any mineral across the world. If you indulge me, I'll repeat that. I say it is the first time in the history of our country that we have successfully negotiated for 10% royalties for any mineral, which is one of the highest for exploitation of any mineral across the globe. We have already secured a 19% state participation in this mining company, 19%, with a requirement to scale it up to a minimum of 30% Ghanaian participation through listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange for shares to be made available to Ghanaians and Ghanaian entities. What this simply will mean is that when it is all over, Barari DV Limited, the holder of this mineral right of lithium, Ghanaian and state participation will be 30%. Foreign participation will be a maximum of 70%, but Ghanaian participation will be a minimum of 30%. This has never happened in the history of our country in respect of any mineral. Never. Ladies and gentlemen, and for the first time in the history of our country, a mining lease contains provisions for the establishment of a refinery, that is value addition and beneficiation. This mining lease has provision which insists that a refinery will be established here in Ghana for processing of this lithium, this mineral. This has never happened. This is the first time. There's been the issue of ratification of the mining lease, and there's been a lot of commentary on that. And it's been raised by several people. And if you allow me, I want to deal with that briefly. This has never been lost on us, as this is expressly provided for in the mining lease granted to Barari DV Limited. Specifically, Clause 1E of the lease states, and I quote, "The mining lease is subject to ratification by Parliament in accordance with Article 2681 of the Constitution and Section 5(4) of Act 703." And he continues, "Upon execution of this mining lease, the minister shall cause the mining lease to be laid in Parliament for ratification," end quote. By the very terms of the lease, therefore, ratification by Parliament is a condition precedent. And as the Supreme Court explained in the Eston Cubic case, an unratified mining lease confers no enforceable rights, and government has always been mindful of this decision. The mining lease in question will be laid before Parliament for ratification. That is non-negotiable. But before such agreements can be laid before Parliament, it must go through a number of processes, including securing Cabinet's approval. The processes are ongoing, and once completed, the agreement will be laid before Parliament for consideration and hopefully ratification. There have also been calls to grant mining leases through a tender process, and I want to deal with that as well. As we explained in our earlier press release, international best practice requires that where a company undertakes exploration and makes a commercial find for minerals, the company is entitled to a right of first refusal to the grant of a mining lease, subject to regulatory compliance. This international best practice is given legal backing by Section 39(2) of the Minerals and Mining Act 2006, Act 703. Needless to point out that the use of the tender process is only feasible where there already exists geological statistics and the state is looking for partners to go straight into mining. If I may explain, is if the state spends its own hard money to conduct the exploration and makes a find, a commercial find, then if the state wants partners to go into mining, then you go through the tender processes. But where a private company comes in to invest and makes a commercial find, by law and by international best practices, the company has a legal right of first refusal. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also indicate that Regulation 2581 of the Minerals and Mining Licensing Regulations 2012 LI 2176, which deals with the grant of mineral rights by tender, gives these instances under which such process may be used, and they are: 1, where the Minerals Commission determines that there exists sufficient mineral information in respect of the area concerned; 2, where the Republic has carried out prior mineral exploration in respect of the area concerned; or 3, where an area becomes available through surrender, revocation, or termination, and 2 or more applications are recorded in the priority register within the 7 days of that area becoming vacant, end quote. In all these circumstances, the state will have enough geological data generated through its own exploration, or where a holder of a mineral right surrenders his interest, or the right is otherwise revoked or terminated. But there is enough statistics generated by a private company that has carried out exploration at great cost, then that entity is by virtue of section 39(2) of Act 703 entitled to the grant of a mineral right subject to regulatory compliance, in which case the tender system cannot be legally tenable. The historical lack of resources to undertake exploration has thus meant that we have had to depend on private companies to undertake exploration of most of our minerals, which then entitles them to the grant of mining leases without going through the tender process. And as I say, Barari DV Limited got their first recognizance license as far back as August 2012. They established that legal right as far back as August 2012. And in any event, ladies and gentlemen, the private sector, both foreign and Ghanaian participation, is in accord with best international practice, and this can be verified from several mining countries across the world. It is the private sector that normally engages in exploration. There have also been calls for the establishment of a Ghana lithium company to undertake lithium mining and develop the value chain of the mineral from lithium mining to battery production. And I would like to deal with this too. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it will be recalled that the policy statement presented to Parliament last year considered the option of establishing an entity along the lines of the Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation, GIADEC, and the Ghana Integrated Iron and Steel Development Corporation, GISDEC. However, the volumes of the mineral we have currently and our quest to ensure optimal benefit for the exploitation of this mineral meant that option was not feasible for several considerations. Firstly, globally, only China has an end-to-end lithium value chain. This is why we have instituted in this transaction the retention of a significant part of the value chain, which we will work systematically to eventually construct here in our country the full value chain for lithium. But as we have said, we will not export lithium in its raw form. Everything we have done in respect of this transaction and all the measures we have put in place in respect of this particular transaction will mean that Ghana's lithium resources will not be exported in their raw state. That is why the mining lease includes provisions for the establishment of a refinery and the provision of the use of other linkages to support local industries in Ghana. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in everything we have done with this mining lease, in all humility and modesty, the interest of the Ghanaian people has been paramount. It has been months of thorough negotiations and hard work in respect of this transaction. Nothing has been agreed to casually. Everything has been thought through and everything has been worked out and all the options have been considered. And what we've arrived at is in the ultimate interest of the good people of Ghana. The government of President Akufo-Addo remains committed to the prudent, effective, and efficient management of the natural resources of our country, which have been entrusted to us, and doing so in the spirit of transparency, integrity, candor, and utmost good faith for the benefit of our nation. We remain focused on this goal and call on you all, nationals and residents of our country, to support government in this quest. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Mr. Martin Ayisi, to present to you the terms, benefits, and way forward of the Barari DV Limited lithium mining lease. I thank you for your attention.
Minister, thank you very much. You've actually made life easy for me, so I may skip some of my slides. Minister, this is raw lithium. I'll pass it around. So those of you, so this is what he said will not go out in a raw form. So this is lithium. Well, if you take it out, it is no use to you. Because the quantity you need to get something out of it, that is it. Let's go to the first slide. I think Minister has spoken a lot about this, so I could as well skip it. The slides will be made available when we finish. So I'll save time. You can also skip this one. Hang on for a second, go back. So my presentation will take this format. The background, the project, the policy for the negotiations, which Minister talked about. I'll just go into a fine detail. Then the lithium value chain, the terms and benefits, and then the way forward. Next slide. For those of you who don't know the green minerals, I provided a table of a few of them. And if you look at, you can see lithium runs throughout. There's a column for electric vehicles, the kind of minerals that you use. There's a column for renewable energy and energy storage, and then the electronics. You can see lithium is all over the place. So again, this will be made available. Next slide. I'll skip this one because Minister has spoken a lot about it. You can skip this one. Yes, Minister, it's important we put things in perspective. What are our critics saying? First, they said we should look at the emerging practice in Latin America. And then what Minister said a short while ago, they said you should adopt competitive bidding or JVs or service contracts. There's no doubt about that, and nobody will doubt that. That is transparent, like Minister said. Yes, you can maximize the rent, and of course, you get a higher value because you know what is there. Then you secure a greater value for the state. And then I think what he said before he took his seat, he said we should establish a special purpose vehicle like GIADEC or GISDEC to handle that. So essentially, if you look at all the commentaries, the criticisms, many of them center around this. This is just a summary of them. I'll discuss some of them as we go along. Next slide. I think, Minister, you said a lot about this. Again, this will be made available, the chronology of events. When he made those statements in Parliament, it was subject to a lot of debate, and then he highlighted the importance of it. And of course, the memo that went to Cabinet. Next slide. So eventually, Minister, I think you went public. I brought the paper here. You can see front banner headline after all this exercise. So I think as the debates and discussions were going on, I think people were oblivious of the fact that there was a lot of policy considerations that went into all that we've done. Now, in brief, these are some of the things that were discussed in Cabinet. So even the criticisms from IE and Co., you can see it is a third option there. So number one, we amend the current policy, which is nearly a decade, to incorporate provisions on green minerals. And then secondly, just have some guidelines to just do business as usual. Or the third one, prepare a completely separate policy and legal regime for green minerals and build it to the GIADEC status. So it is nothing. So when we had IE and Co., you realize that we've thought through this already. So it's unfortunate when we gave them the document by email and we said, look, come sit with us. Let's have all the discussion and give you the policy bank and considerations. They didn't mind us. In their first encounter, they didn't read. And then when they heard us, they asked for the document, we gave it to them and said, invite us. They did not invite us. So their point was even one of the policy considerations at Cabinet. Next slide. So why did Cabinet choose the option that we are using now? That is the option where we amend the current policy and include provisions on green minerals. These are the justification. One, we don't have geological data. I'm the CEO of Minerals Commission. I don't have any occurrence of lithium apart from what is in the wire. There's no geological data. So take bauxite. Bauxite, Etiwa, is known. It's been there since the Russians did that and Kwame Nkrumah. Ninyani, the deposits are known. We even have an existing mine at Awaso. So you are seeing two different scenarios where one, deposits exist for which you have established GIADEC, and the other one, there's practically no information. We don't have any data on lithium as we speak. Then the other reason the minister mentions that Ewoya is relatively small, very small. I will show you some data besides. There are just 3 countries that control 70% of the world's deposit: Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, the so-called lithium triangle where their borders meet. And of course, Zimbabwe, which has the largest deposit in Africa, number 6 in the world, and also Mali. Let's go to the next point. So I've indicated this there. And I just got this information, Minister, from the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency. That is our equivalent of a GIPC. 160 applications, just 6 months. I can't point to 20 at Minerals Commission. It's all because of the prospectivity of their geology. 160 application in 6 months. I've given the reference, you can check for yourself. They've gotten even 5 from US. The 160 is just from China. I've not even looked at the other countries from Asia. And then, as I said, we don't have any known deposits apart from Ewoya. There's nothing. The other one too is that you have to attract exploration, which is very high risk. This thing is 5% success. The chance of hitting it is just 5%. There are a lot of countries or companies that have come here and they've left. I'll give you an example. Birim Goldfields, they came to spend millions in Savannah, they didn't find gold, they are gone. We've given it out to small scale. And of course, we are competing with countries with better geology, far better geology than us. Zimbabwe, Mali, and the grades are very high. I take Gulamina, for example, it's 1.38. Ewoya is 1.25. Then of course, that is the reason why we did not go the GIADEC route. The very route IEA and the other critics are talking about. These are the reasons. Other than that, what are you going to do? Do we get up and zone government Ghana into blocks and say people should come for competitive bidding? Where is the data? You have to take people to the data room. We don't have that information. So that is why option 1 was approved by cabinet. The next slide. Minister, as far as I'm concerned, most people didn't know that our law has provisions for competitive building. I think you mentioned it, but I'm putting it on the screen so that people can see it. So go and read. Again, go to our website. Go and read LI 2176, the licensing regulations. It makes detailed provisions for the use of competitive building. That is 275 and 258. He mentioned it, but you can see it is listed here. So that is our problem. Where's the data? We don't have it. So assuming for whatever reason, I hope it doesn't happen, we don't intend to do that. Let's say we withdraw Ewoya now. We'll go to competitive bidding because we have data. That's the kind of thing we are talking about. So most people didn't know that there is competitive building. In fact, ASF made a statement that we should adopt that in our law. But it is already in our law. This is something they could have requested from us. Next slide. And then it goes on and on and on. But be that is may, we still make sure that we meet the 30% minimum requirement. So these are some of the things cabinet approved under option 1. Ensure that you change the law and enhance state participation to the same 30% minimum. Remember, minimum. So we could even go as far as 50 or 60. It all depends on the project economics. Then apart from that too, the minimum royalty is supposed to be 7%. Minimum 7. So we could even go higher, again depending on the project economics, because some may have a low grade, some may have a higher grade. Next slide. These are the provisions. So Mineral Income Investment Fund, he will talk about his part when we get there. He's supposed to hold a state interest. And then just look at the second point, mandatory listing. So when we hear people saying that, oh, you should have gone for 50%, why must everything go for the state? What about Ghanaians? So we said, let the state take 19%, the other minimum at least 30% or more. Let's take it to the stock exchange. And then at the stock exchange, it is being restricted to the likes of SNIDs and all those pension funds and individuals like you or those who have money. So when we start the adverts and co, come and buy. Everything must not go to the state. So they did not capture that bit, that the state must not necessarily hold 50%, as even I saw yesterday from one Professor Jampo, who said if we don't get 50%, there will be militancy at Ewoya. That's what he said. And of course, we should also review it so that within the policy measures, that is a decision. Let's take the next slide. Now, look at this. 5 months ago, Minister, it's exactly 5 months. Look at the concentrate. What I'm passing around is a raw lithium. When you process it, you get a concentrate. That is the price. You look at the price, you see how it has fallen from nearly 4,000 to 1655. It's falling. People are producing lithium now. Just 5 months. Look at the price. And then when you refine what the minister talked about, you can see the price in July, 42,000. As at yesterday, it is 1,711, 17,000. So clearly, the case for refining has been made. 8-10 times when you refine that rock I'm passing around. That is it. And then also, that is a stage. After that, you make the batteries, you do the cells, and then you assemble them. What we are worried is the fact that, or what we hear from people is the fact that we just end up number one. No. I'll talk more about that in the agreement. Let's move on. It's important when you are doing anything, you put it in context. Look at the statistics we have on the board. China has 13% reserves. And then, what do you call it? Australia, 52, 25. So just Chile and Australia produce almost about 80% of the lithium today. And then, of course, China dominates the midstream and downstream. So 44%. 44%. That is the concentrate. Can you go to the previous slide? I want to show you something. The 44%. No, the previous one. Previous. So that is it. Refinery. The refining stage where there's so much money. China alone controls 44%. Let's move on. And then you look at the tail end. As we are getting to the battery itself, China again comes in 77, 78%. So practically China dominates everything. That is it. Next slide. Now let's come to the terms which has generated so much controversy, and I've done some comparison here and there. So we are charging 10%. Means I've made life easy by providing the various clauses in the agreement so that you don't spend your time reading that 40-page document. So if you go to clause 20, you find it there. Australia is 5%. But Australia, as we speak, produces at least half of the world's lithium. 5% royalty. 10%, you can see is there, 10%. Chile, which sits on 40% of the world's reserve, one country, Chile, known. Chile is saying that they want 51% JV, but they have data, they sit on 40%, one country. That's their royalty, 8 to 26, using the margin. So that's why he was happy on the point that outside Chile, we have perhaps the highest royalty in the world. And then, of course, Mali, 6%. And then Zimbabwe, 5%. You go to Mali, there's a project called Gulamina. It is 3 times the size of Ewoya, 3 times, 1 million tons. We are doing 350. Look at the royalty. If we had a Malian type of deposit, means I will have asked you to charge 40% royalty. Okay? And then Zimbabwe, 5%. That is it. So you can look at it. And then those who even have more reserves and better grades than us are even charging this. They are raising to the bottom. Where do you expect people to take their high risk money? Again, let's look at free carry interest. Mali has 10%. Zimbabwe, there's no free carry interest. Latin America, there's nothing like free carry interest. So you have to look at the entire package. There's nothing like free carry interest in Australia. That is it. Next slide. Then these are the other ones. And then there's some controversy brewing about community development. Please, that 1% there, it is not an ownership issue. It's not an ownership issue. This is the first time, Minister, I would like to repeat, this is the first time in the history of Ghana that we are legislating directly into a contract for community to benefit. Right. What you go, you see the Newmont Harford Foundation, Edikan, Pesos, all those ones, they are voluntary. And it's even, yes, it's voluntary. So Newmont, for example, does 1% profit. What if they don't declare profit? And then 1% of an ounce, $1 of every ounce they sell. And this morning, the price of gold is $2,034. So 1% of that, and then 1% of profit. You can calculate that if it was 1% revenue. Yes, and every country in Africa has adopted 1%. That's a price, anything between 0.5 and 1%. Fortunately, we have drafted a regulation to make community development agreement compulsory. Yes, we are the only country that have not done that. And the sad aspect is that you go to Tanzania, it is 1% CDA compulsory. Gita Mines pays it, that is Anglo Gold Ashanti, but here it is voluntary. So that is it. And I did my calculation, the minimum, you are talking about $6 million. Yes, minimum, the minimum price, the one we use for the model. I'm not talking about the kind price. 1587, the one that I was using in the feasibility, you're talking about $6 million. I asked the MC of Infantima, he says his common fund is $100,000, 1.2 million, which is his biggest source of revenue. So you can see this is really a game changer. That is it. So Aware has opened the doors for us to change everything about community development funding. That is it. Let's move on. And then FESPA. Minister, I'll shock you this morning. In all the discussions, nobody has been talking about the other byproducts. So FESPA, kaolin, which is in there, of course, in addition to limestone and tack and clay, these are the 5 minerals that are used for ceramics. We have 5 ceramics companies in Ghana. Keda Ceramics, Jintao, Marco Polo, Waka, and Sentio, those who are doing oil. Now, they are the only ones in Tema. The other 4 are within the Nchama Shama enclave. They are all using a gas pipeline. I checked the data this morning. They used 960,000 tons of FESPA at a grade of 8%. Where the discovery is 15 million tons. Divide by 12 years, divide by 1 year, 1,250,000. So, give and take exactly the deposit defined in a way is what is the market size now. But then currently, the nearly 1 million tons, these 5 companies use, they get it from the artisanal miners in Western and Central region. So we need to do something about it. In the agreement, we insisted that we'll make sure no FESPA or kaolin will be exported. So they were supposed to provide a feasibility study. This was given to me on Monday. Because we went to COP, I have not had the discussion of going through with you. Next week, I'll get a full feasibility. So by next week, we will know what to do with our FESPA in Ghana. So if they are saying that establish Ghana Lithium Company to take advantage of all the value chain, we are already ahead of time. We don't want to behave like the gas pipeline where the warning was coming, will you be flaring, will you flare, and then we started producing the gas, and then we were flaring. But by next week, we'll know. In the agreement, we gave them 4 months up to February. We are in December. So this is for my eyes only, and you. So when we get a feasibility next week, we will now come to the block and say it. That is it. And interestingly, this is local content. This report, Minister, was done by UMAT. The company contracted UMAT to do it. Local content, yes. It was headed by Professor Mankwa, a renowned metallurgist. So it was not done by any expert from Australia or Canada anywhere. This was locally done by our own university, UMAT. It's here. And then it is also in the agreement that if they cannot establish a chemical plant, when a third party does it, they will have to supply the concentrate. That is it. That report has to be ready by February. By February, we will have that report. And then, of course, the MOU that was signed, this is what it has led to. Next slide. I've talked about this already. FESPA, kaolin, and quartz. So they are used for ceramics. So, Minister, I was quite happy when I heard that we are planning to ban the importation of ceramics. I think I support that so much. So these are the kind of things we can use them for: ceramics, glass, etc. And then let us take note that construction is for 14 months. 14 months. You have to get EPA, you have to get all those things. So we are looking at somewhere by Easter or April next year. They still have to go to all those processes. Means that by that time, all these reports as to what to do with the first part, the project economics of a chemical plant, we'll know that. We'll know that, and again, we'll come here and tell the people of Ghana. So by the time the man will be ready somewhere in the middle of 2025, we are ready to go. We are ready to go. So if the commentators have spoken to us, they will have gotten all this information. Yes. I will defer to Nanaya to discuss more of this, his part, because we heard also saying that we are paid too much. So he's here, he'll talk about it, what went into negotiations. And then that is it. So what are the way forward? I mean, what's the way forward? I will not waste your time. You had said the ratification is a must. That's why I put it in red. Minister, we have even put it in the agreement that the agreement is not valid until it is ratified. So refer to clause 1E of the Barrales. It is stated there. So again, it was moot for our commentators to say that if the agreement is not ratified, you're a bad lawyer. It will be ratified. Again, they will have to secure environmental permit. They are working on it. They are working on the operating permit. And then they will also come back to Minerals Commission for all those permits. And then all these various reports, once we get them by February, we'll make a decision. So that is it. Let me say this. By February, we'll know whether or not we have to establish a chemical plant, whether they will do it or a third party will do it. We will know what to do with our FESPA. We will know what to do with our kaolin. The quality here is 27%. The one they are buying from artisanal miners is 8%. So I'm even worried what the artisanal miners will do with this, because clearly all the 5 ceramics companies will buy from Ewoya. Why? Because the higher the grade, the less you spend. So that is it. So on that note, I would like to seek your permission to defer to Nanaya to complete the discussion. Thank you.
Honorable Minister for Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, Honorable Deputy Minister, ladies and gentlemen of the press, I believe this is the first time that Minerals Income Investment Fund, or MIF, is engaging the press. So I'd like to say a big thank you to the Minister for giving us that opportunity. We've been accused of being media shy and not appearing, but we're a typical financial institution, so sometimes we have to be a bit media shy. But before I delve into our part of the project, or the role we play, I'd like to give a bit of perspective on what we do, and just a brief on what Minerals Income Investment Fund is. Because I realized coming in that a number of the press do not really know or understand the role we play. So the Minerals Income Investment Fund is really a sovereign wealth fund. It was established by an Act of Parliament, 978, as amended. It was in line with the President's vision of ensuring that we garner value from the mining sector in a 360 way, that is from end to end, including the value delivery process and the value chain. So we essentially do 3 things. We are responsible for managing the equity interest of the government in all mining companies. So as you saw reference to the free carried interest, we manage the free carried interest. That means that all dividend payments come to MIF. The second important thing that we do, or the role we play, is that we are responsible for all the royalties that are paid by every mineral type. So these royalties are paid to MIF, collected by GRA, and then we manage these royalties. So how do we manage the royalties and the dividend? For the royalties, 20% goes to the Minerals Development Fund. That is through the fund that you see royalties going to the stool lands, the local government, etc. So that's 20% going to Mineral Development Fund. Then 2.4% is paid to the Ghana Revenue Authority. And then 2% stays with MIF for the operations of MIF. The other 75.6 goes into investment. So the purposes for which we've been set up is to ensure that we re-inject or reinvest these royalties and dividend back into the mining sector. So we end up taking more equity stake, for example, like we've done in Ashanti Gold, and we are doing presently with Lithium. We support the value chain, injecting capital or equity in the value chain of the mining sector, with the whole idea from the president's vision of having a paradigm shift from what used to be in the past. Ironically, reference has been made to these agreements being colonial, but the whole idea of MIF, in line with the vision, is to ensure that we pump or re-inject capital back into the mining sector that will benefit Ghanaians. As regards our investment in Atlantic, I don't know who's responsible for the. Because my colleague CEO has actually gone through the fine details, I'll just give a brief on what our investment that led to Ghana having 19% really. So MIF is investing 27.9 million in Atlantic Lithium via its Ghanaian subsidiary, Bavari, which has been mentioned. This gives us a 6% interest in the company. So if you look at the 13% carried interest that we negotiated, Mincom negotiated, which we supported, and you add our 6%, that gives government of Ghana 19%. Then of course, there's the 10% royalty that has already been mentioned, as you are aware, and that pleases us because that actually gives us extra cash to re-inject into the mining community or the mining value chain. The 10%, which is at variance to the 3 to 5% that we originally had, gives us about $624 million across the life of the mine. $624 million. Then we also subscribed to 19,245,574 Atlantic Holding Company shares. This has not been mentioned in the press, and for some reason we've not had this being commented on, but this is actually another feat that has to be highlighted. This means that Ghana government, through MIF, has 3% of the holding company of Atlantic. This allows us to piggyback on the back of Atlantic in their search or quest for other resources across the world. And this actually gives us a further board seat on Atlantic globally. Questions have been asked on how we worked on the valuation. I met a press person who asked me how we arrived at the valuation, and it's actually a very important point. At the time that we started negotiating, I think Minister made mention of the fact that we've been negotiating for months. We've actually been negotiating for 15 months, moving almost to 18 months really, but for 15 months back and forth. At the time we started negotiating, the share price of Atlantic was around 0.61 pence, yes, 0.61 pence. We were able to negotiate at a strike rate using a formula that we ended up agreeing with Atlantic on a 15-month weighted average, which came to 0.2598. That's 20 pence per share. As we speak right now, the Atlantic shares is around 0.333 pence. So even before putting money in, government of Ghana through MIF is actually making a gain before any production of lithium. And this is the strategy that we put in. So even before production is there, we are actually making money. We also negotiated warrants. This means that we negotiated to buy further shares at a lock price. Considering the fact that there's the likelihood of the share price going up, we locked the price at 0.33. And the current share price is just around that. We envisage that the share price will be going up when production comes in. So we may actually end up having maybe 0.78. You can never tell, but we have a locked-in price, which means that even if the share price moves to 0.78, 0.66, government of Ghana is able to buy at 0.33, and we can decide to exercise that warrant or not. But imagine the share price getting to 1 and us buying further shares at 0.33. This is how we invest. That would give us an extra 4.5% into the company from the 3%. That's the holding company outside the 19% that Government of Ghana has on the local entity. So we also negotiated further terms, and I think these were what I call the garnishing. We agreed that MIF should be allowed to participate in even processing up to 40% of the lithium that is produced here. The reason why we thought of this was because we're looking at the possibility of the company, because what we invested in covers all the tenements of the company. So in anticipation that there will be more lithium coming up, we said, look, we want to competitively bid for 40% of the lithium. Reason why we want to do this is to leverage on this and attract investors in the processing sector. That's the value chain. And then use these royalties, dividend, etc., to co-invest, and for Ghana to even have a higher stake in the value chain, in the processing value chain. So this is part of the agreement that MIF struck with Atlantic. The CEO of my colleague CEO of Mincom has already given quite a bit on the feldspar, and feldspar is extremely important. And as most media may be aware, our first exports under AFTA was actually ceramics. So we are pushing government to develop or push for a ceramic development strategy where we will add value to the ceramics industry. But Mr. EC has talked extensively about that. Then on the board representation, again, this is important. We've negotiated 2 seats on the local entity, that's the Barari, Atlantic Barari. Hitherto, it was 1 seat. For just 3% of our stake in the holding company, the Atlantic Global Company, which we can actually push by a further 4.5%, we've negotiated we've actually negotiated 1 board seat. This is a listed company, and this is important. Hitherto, you will never have the chance of having a government person sitting on the global entity. We don't have Newmont Worldwide having a government person on the Newmont board, but we've been able to negotiate this, and allows us to have some sort of bird's eye view on the operations of the holding company because of the stake we have in the company. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the most important bit, as a financial entity that is investing in this project, the Ghanaian people would like to see the gains and the financial benefits that are going to come up or come out from this project. I think I hate to say this because it's a listed company, but you understand. For us, we saw an opportunity. We are a typical financial institution. We saw an opportunity where we believe the shares were undervalued. And this is why we are even making more gains at present. With a locked-in price of 0.26, we are looking at an intrinsic value of the company ranging from 1.25 to 1.9 per share. So if you're looking at an intrinsic value of 1.26 to $1.9 per share, and you're buying it at 0.26 and now 0.33%, I don't think I need to make the maths. I think it's very obvious that we're actually gaining from this. At this point in time, with just the purchase that we've made, we have a 31% gain in our investments in Atlantic Lithium. And at this point, we've not even disbursed the cent. But because we've actually locked in the agreement, we've actually made a gain of 31% in this planned investment. I will not go into the Asori. For the $5 million investment that we've done in the holding company, we are looking at an intrinsic value of $24.4 million. This is just for 3% and from 5% investment that we have made. Again, we looked at the opportunity that the shares at that time were undervalued, and we exploited that opportunity. The graphs, the graphical illustration, I believe, gives the press a fair idea of the gains that we've made, which I illustrated in terms of the gains that MIF and the government have made. At this point in time, at a recent offer of 0.33 by Asori to take over the company, which is ongoing, we are looking at an upside of our shares at 62%. From that 0.26% of the shares that we bought, we are looking at an upside of 62% as we speak. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will just end with the final slide. This is just an overview of the financial gain. Over the life of the mine, we are looking at 2.4 billion with average life mine of EBITDA of 316 million per annum from the MIF investment. $2 yes, dollars. Free cash flow over the life of mine is $2.4 billion. We've already talked about the percentage stake. Apart from the 6%, apart from the 13% free carry, MIF 6% gives Ghana 19%. Contrary to what I read this morning, that a lecturer from University of Ghana is alluding that an Australian company has 87% and government just has 13%. The second largest, the largest shareholder of Atlantic has 25%. That's the largest shareholder of Atlantic. This is a listed company. The fact that we define it as Australian does not mean it's an Australian company having 87% and then, you create the ripples that can we go to Australia and do this? No. That biggest shareholder is actually a South African company. It's not even Australian. So we must look at things in proper perspective, I believe. And there's a Ghanaian local shareholder. That's about, we're looking at about 4.4% now because of dilution, the Ghanaian. That's the Barari. So if you really look at the Ghanaian interest, it's actually 4.4 plus 19. That's 23. And the government's aim for critical minerals is to aim at a minimum of 30%. And we've not even spoken about the listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange. So it's important that we engage. It's important that the media engages us and we give the right information. If you look at MIF's post-tax NPV on a wire alone, because we are looking at about 10 tenements, on a wire alone, we are looking at $90 million on our 6% paid interest and $195 million on the free carry value. In all, MIF's equity interest is now valued at $285 million based solely on Iwea's DFS. That's the definitive feasibility study. So the idea of the thinking that this does not inure to the benefit of Ghanaians, ladies and gentlemen of the press, is totally false. So since most of the bits have been finally articulated by the Minister and the CEO of Minerals Commission, we are open to questions, but I hope that this has given you a really broad-based idea of what MIF does and what our involvement in the Atlantic Lithium has in terms of beneficiation or benefits to the Ghanaian people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edward Nanaya Okorante, Chief Executive Officer of MIF. The presentations are just mind-blowing. There is so much that I didn't know before now that I believe Ghanaians have also had the benefits to know, including 1% revenue for community development. So imagine how transformative that will be for the people of Mfantsiman when it comes to so many social amenities, infrastructure within the 8 communities where this lithium mine is going to be situated. Also, it is important to note that throughout all the presentations by Honorable Minister and the Chief Executive Officer of Minerals Commission and MIF, they have continuously mentioned that, 1, the company will be listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. So if you are in this room and you have the money, when the time or the need arises, you can also participate and get an interest in the company as a Ghanaian. So they are not keeping it as a reserve for only states or government participating. Ordinary Ghanaians, ordinary Ghanaian companies can also participate. And as mentioned by Minister, he says the agreement is subject to ratification by Parliament. So by that and all the other things that they have mentioned, they have followed all the legal requirements and also sought the best interests of Ghanaians in executing this lease agreement. So